So here we're going to continue on with our user interface layout for our lucky lotto picker. Now, we still have a few warnings here, and these warnings are actually fairly benign warnings at this point. I've got some warnings about misplaced views. So last time we sent all the auto layout constraints for our various views. So this would lay out the buttons and everything. All the views would lay themselves out to look good on an iPad, on any of the iPhones. So well, you'll see some, again, you need to be very, very patient with setting your constraints. I find myself having to add constraints and delete constraints and modify constraints and tweak things, and it can be kind of a maddening process. So if you were very, very frustrated on the last video trying to set all these constraints, welcome to the club. I've done this app several times now, so I kind of know how to set all the constraints. So hopefully that you've reached a point where you've got most of the constraints set. So all my constraints are set now, and you'll notice I don't really have any. All my warnings are just down to misplaced views, and these are pretty easy to fix. So like for instance, this misplaced view, so I can go under the little triangle TIE fighter and just say update the frames for that. So that'll get rid of that warning. Go to one of my other ones, do the same thing, update the frames for that. So I can get rid of all these warnings by just updating the appropriate frames, or I can just say, update the frames for each of these. And so this is just making sure what I see in Interface Builder agrees with what the constraints are. So at this point, I've gotten rid of all those warnings at this point, and which is actually, for me, quite a feat, is to have a layout like this where I actually have no warnings. And what you really don't want to see are ambiguous layout. That means you don't have a sufficient number of constraints. Your system is under constraint. Or you don't want to be over constrained. That's where you have too many constraints, and so you either need to change the priorities or remove constraints if you're over constrained. So if you're under constrained, that means you need more constraints. So setting all these constraints can really, really be a pain. Now, you notice I can run this thing and build and run and see what it looks like in the simulator. Here it is on an iPhone 6. It looks it's okay so far. It looks pretty reasonable in both landscape and, I noticed some strict constraints don't seem quite right. Like I noticed the right size of my pick button. So how do I fix that? So hardware right. So let me go ahead and see if I can figure out what that issue is. So I'm going to select my pick button, go to the size inspector, and align. Here we go. Align the trailing edge here. That should not be with the 6. The constant should not be 5. That should be 0. So I'm going to fix that. And then align the leading edge. The leading edge is -1. That should actually just be 0. So let me tweak that a little bit. So that'll tweak that. So let's give that a run, see what that looks like. All right, so the trailing edge of this pick button should be aligned there. That's good. Let's go ahead and rotate the device and rotate right. Okay, all right. Okay, that looks pretty good. This would be a good time to go ahead and commit. We'll say initial auto layout complete. Put an exclamation point on that because that's a lot of times that I find that to be quite an achievement just to get to the point where you have a bunch of constraints that actually work and are not over constrained and not under constrained. So that's quite an accomplishment. Now you notice there's some constraints we didn't set. For instance, I never set the height of my segment of control. Now I set so that the right edge was centered with the 3 button, and the left edge was centered with the 1 button, but I never set its height. That's because some of these things actually have intrinsic sizes. Like I never set the width or height on the max value label because it has an intrinsic size. And so some of these buttons actually have an intrinsic size, but I don't use those. So anyway, there's some more futzing we could do with that, more that we can do. And let me show you something that's kind of cool. Instead of, we could actually build this for a number of different devices. So, on the simulator, you can see we can build things for iPhone 6, iPhone 6 Plus, the iPhone 5. You can go all the way back to an iPhone 4S, and we could actually run these in all these devices. But and you can test it all, and that gets to be kind of a pain. But let me show you another trick that you can do. So I'm going to make my Xcode a little wider here. And up on the right, I'm going to go under the Assistant Editor, which is just these two little rings that you see up here. So I'm going to click on that. So so that kind of splits my editor. Right now, on my editor in the middle on the left, I've got Interface Builder. On the right, I've got the editor for my view controller, which is what I'll want later. But for right now, I'm actually going to change this right one to go to Preview. And look at that. So right now I can see what this looks like on an iPhone 4-inch. Matter of fact, down here on the bottom, you see the little rotation thing. I can actually click and see what it looks like. Oh, there's what it looks like when it's in landscape mode. So that looks pretty good. But I could actually select another device. So maybe I want to go to, that's a 4-inch. Let's go to an iPhone 5.5-inch. So I'll add that. Okay, so if I look at that, I can see, sure enough, that what that looks like on an iPhone 5.5-inch. I can rotate that and look at it in landscape mode and see what it looks like. Looks good. So I'll go back, rotate it back, and I could add another device. So maybe I want to see what the heck does this thing look like on an iPad. So I'll add an iPad. So let's take a look at what it looks like on an iPad. So I'm having trouble scrolling here. Why can't I seem to scroll? Okay. Oh, okay. So there's what it looks like on an iPad. That looks pretty reasonable. All the fonts seem really small and everything. So it looks like there's more details. Let's go ahead and rotate into landscape mode. So yeah, you can see, wow, that looks pretty crazy on an iPad. Those buttons look really big, and the fonts seem really small. So we're going to have to mess with changing the fonts for an iPad, and we can do that. But let's not worry about that just yet. So I can go ahead and delete some of these views. So you can always do that. So let me go back to the normal editor. I'm going to click on the button here to the left to get to my normal editor, and bring my inspector back. All right. So there's a few other little polishy things we can do. But for one thing, we probably want to set the background colors and the colors of all of our, for instance, perhaps, let's work on setting the background colors, right? So let's look at the background color for the title. So if I go to the inspector, and let's say we want to set the background color. So I'll bring up the color editor, and I'm colorblind, so I really struggle with this, and go to an RGB slider. And so let's see if I just make that a really kind of a hideous green. Ooh, that doesn't look very good. Let's throw in some blue. Maybe I'll do, say 126 blue. I'll set green to 255 and red to 0. Okay, so I'll set that to green. All right, so let's set all three of those backgrounds to green. So I'm going to go to my oh, that was the label I was setting. That's not what I meant to do. So let me go, I can always go edit, undo, change background color. Oh, looks like I'm going to have to do this about 1,000 times. Okay, again. Okay, so actually the background color should be clear on that thing. All right, so I actually had the wrong thing selected. I meant to set the background color on the title view. So here we go again. So I'm going to select this. So I'm going to make it, let's see, 120, we'll make it 127 blue, 255, and we'll get rid of the red. Oh, we could leave some red in. Let's leave some red in. We'll make the red 127. All right, excellent. So let's go to the pick view, bottom view, and set its background value. And let's also set that to the same values. So these 127, 127, okay, and then let's go for the buttons view and set it to the same set of colors. We'll set the button view, set its background color, and we'll set its, it's not green very well here. Let's set the background color on that. sometimes I can't get the color editor to do what I want, so other again. Okay, there we go. Set that to 255, set these to 127, 127, 127. All right, so now we've got the background colors. Let's set the color of our label. Let's set this to, we'll set this to a dark green. So I'll set this to like, I don't know, I'll make it 127 green and leave the other. How does that look? All right, excellent. I'll do the same thing with my max value label here. So let's set the color on that. I'll set it to 127 green. Take my segmented control. Aha. So my segmented control, I think what I want to do is set the tint on the segmented control. I'm going to set the tint on my segmented control to, let's see if I get this darn thing to come up. So I'll try that again. So I'm going to select the segmented control. Sometimes I have trouble getting this to behave. Oh, there we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and set the tint on that to kind of let's set that to kind of a dark green. Okay, and let's work on let's make all of our buttons the same color. So I'm going to select all the buttons, and I'm going to go to their view. I'm going to set their background color. Let's set this to. Oh, look, it's only working on one of these. Okay, great. I'm going to set those to. Kind of a, maybe I'll set them to kind of almost a yellow color. Is that, yeah, that looks kind of ugly. I'll set it to, I'll make that 75. I don't know, that looks kind of ugly. Maybe I'll take out some of the red. No, leave the red in. Leave that 255. All right, how's that look? Okay. So 255, 255, 97. All right, let's set all the backgrounds for these buttons. And so hopefully I can set these all at once. Let's see if it lets me. So I'm going to say background, light gray color, and let's set these to awesome, somewhere down in here. Okay, all right, cool. And something else I'd like to do that's kind of cool is use rounded buttons. So if I actually select one of these buttons, you can see what I can do is under the identity inspector, is that under the identity inspector? Yeah, there's a key path thing. So I can set some runtime attributes for it. So with this button selected, I'm gonna select the runtime attribute. I'm gonna say, we'll talk about layers later. I'm gonna set it's underneath layer. It's I think corner radius is what I'm looking for. Corner radius and camel case. I can change its type to a number. And I'm going to set its value to say, I don't know, I'll set it to 10. So now, oops, it didn't set the, try that again. Layer dot corner radius. All right, so now for that button, I've got this runtime attribute. Now notice it didn't change, it didn't make the button rounded at all, but if we actually go ahead and run our app, you can see, sure enough, that button now has rounded corners, right? So we could do a similar thing with all of our other buttons and whatnot, but let's go ahead and leave things there.